So welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time to tell us everything you know about getting a grant or writing for a grant. Could you please introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, my name is Douwenga. I work for a company called Ugoo, and Ugoo is a grant intermediary, and our main business is to get grants or subsidies, as some may call it, for innovative IT companies, of which gaming studios are a pretty big part.
Yeah, I think I don't have much to add. I work as a consultant as well at Ugoo, which basically means you're responsible for writing a variety of grants. So that's basically why we're here, of course.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, let's start over with our biggest question. You help us out, right? When we need help with writing a grant or a voucher or stuff like that. But when I think about writing for these things, I never know where to start. Could you give us an overview of what kind of subsidies or grants there are?
Yeah, well, the overview is pretty big, of course, because there are a lot of grants available in the Netherlands. And with a lot, I mean hundreds, maybe even thousands. Best way to start probably is visiting the site of RVO. In Dutch it's called the Rijksdienst voor Ondernemend Nederland. Their search isn't perfect, but you can use pretty good search functionality to find which grants are suitable for the phase you're in and what the specifics are for each grant in specific, of course.
I talked to your colleague, and she explained to me that there are a couple of categories when it comes to to grants. Just to name a few, there were tech grants or more theme-oriented grants. So how do they come up with these kinds of, weird categories or structures?
Well, those categories are basically coming from policy of the Dutch government, of course, and that can change over the years. And some grants have a pretty strong base in the Dutch government and are available throughout the years, and the other programs come in for, let's say, 1 or 2 years and are not successfully and then are closed or changed or whatever. So the landscape of subsidies and grants changes all the time.
Yeah. What you also see, maybe in addition, there are quite a lot of what they call top sectoren, highly growth sectors maybe that are really important for the Dutch government. And these top sectors, they are intended to be stimulated as much as possible. So that's also where several themes come from. You have maybe 8 to 10 top sectors, I think.
I remember the creative industries was one of the biggest.
Yes, yeah. Creative industry is one of the top sectors, but you also have, for example, HTSM, which also facilitates ICT, which can also be really important, of course, for game development. So yeah, that's within the top sectors.
Right. So so we have these huge sectors that we can write to, but how do you know where do you start when you want to write a grant?
Well, I think it's of course really important to, like Benny said already, to visit RVO, but there are also other local or authorities maybe that also facilitate grants. So the landscape is pretty broad. I think what you should do, you should really, of course, read all about the specific grants that there are in the Netherlands, but also if you know, for example, you want to apply for a WBSO application, which is a grant that is, well, you can say maybe highly available within the Netherlands. You should really read all about the rules and regulations, of course, because it's really important to fill in an application that is in line with the rules and regulations. So I think that's one of the main important aspects that you should do. But there are also info meetings that you could visit to receive more information about all the specifics of the grants that are in the Netherlands. So that's really important.
Right. So we need to actually read carefully what these things are about. But still, it's sometimes kind of hard. And we just talked about it, right? To call the grant and say can you help me out, or can you explain a little bit more? Is that a normal approach, or are we just really blunt doing this?
No, that's a pretty normal approach. And actually, most people you will talk to will be very helpful. And if the actual grant that you're calling to isn't applicable for you, they probably will help you or try to help you to get you to your next step, of course, which is probably another grant which is more suitable for your company, or for your product, for your a specific thing to develop, or for the phase of your company is in.
I can also imagine that these grants, they you say they're changing all the time. But are there, like, people are paid to give them out, right? So are these people changing as well, or?
Yes and no, of course. Well, the Dutch government is changing continuously, of course, and they're continuously rescheduling programs, people, etc., etc. And depending on the program, they tend to look for the suitable experts, of course. So if you would take a look, for example, for IT-related subsidies, in which technical knowledge is needed, then RVO has a lot of experts in that area, and they're mainly used for WBSO applications, for example, but they can also be used for other programs which has a strong relation to IT technology. So an advisor from RVO, which is currently at the WBSO position, will also be helping out with, for example, an innovation credit, or maybe vroege fase financiering, or other types.
So if we take a look at the website, right? How do I find these experts here?
I think first step is to press the button Subsidies.
Press the button. There you go. That's one start. Yeah.
It's a lot better. It's a lot better this site these days. And this is, for example, an overview of all the programs that they're having at this moment. And on the left, you can filter on the types of projects, or the types of phases that your company is in. So, for example, research is pretty applicable, I guess, for game studios. There are also different types, of course, because not everything is in the form of simply cash money, but it can also be credits, or help with certain phases in your company.
Right. So if I want to find the BDSO subsidy, where can I find it?
Well, most easily is to search and touch on WBSO.
And then we see like all this text here, and like how do I understand like which experts are there?
The actual persons you mean?
Like how can I reach out to this person behind this grant?
For example, in the WBSO program, there are a lot of advisors. So this isn't a small program. The WBSO is a program of about 1 miljard. So that's 1 billion in English, I guess. So a lot of people are present, and you can probably go all the way down where you can reach out for a phone number. RVO has okay, there it is. And that's RVO uses one phone number for all types of grants these days. And first you will get into a menu in which you can make some selections, and then you will get in contact with the first line advisor, and he can get you up to speed to which program which is probably suitable for you. And if you have really specific questions about certain types of grants, then you will probably be redirected to a second line, of course, with experts of the specific program.
Yeah. That's probably the most, the best way to receive more information about what grants are available in the Netherlands, and also if you have a question about, okay, is there a certain grant that matches my activities at this time? The best thing to do is just to contact RVO by phone. So you can also ask more questions when you receive an answer, of course. So I would really advise that if you have questions about WBSO or about other grants as well, the best way is just to call RVO. You can also send an email, but of course, phoning is better. Yeah.
Yeah, and just check out the information on the website, of course.
Yeah, that helps.
I mean, it helps a lot, and mean, I can imagine that advisors from RVO will be not really amused if you would ask questions which are present on the first homepage of their website. So,
But yeah, you also told me that there are things on the website that doesn't really which do not align with something that's more on the background. Can you tell me a little about that?
Yeah, it happens that that the website, for example, isn't really up to date, or that the actual execution of a program differs a little bit from the information that is present on the website, and that can be really helpful information for you as an applicant, of course. If you feel that a program suits nearly well, but has some minor issues or points on which you could imagine that your problem or your project isn't suitable, then it's always good to call and reach out, or maybe even plan a meeting, because some of those things can be overcome. Or are mentioned not exactly right on their website.
Because I remember that, for example, writing through the stimuleringsfonds, the game needs to have this artistic quality to it, but that's not really clearly defined on the website. So would it be wise to call them and say, okay, I have this kind of game, I think this is the artistic quality there. Does that fit?
Yeah, definitely. Good thing to do. But what you also see is that a lot of grants do have the possibility to submit quick scans. So you can just fill in one A4 paper of an overview of your project. So the grant authority can actually check it and can see, okay, does this have the potential to qualify for this specific grant? So that's also really an advice. So check also, of course, the website, of course, and if there is a possibility to fill in certain quick scans, because it can really help out. It can also really save a lot of effort beforehand already.
Right. So starting a grant writing, first go to the website, check whether or not it fits, then call them, say I'm intending to write it for this and this and this, does it fit? Then do the quick scan and see if it applies to you again, and then start writing the grant.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like the big steps.
In small step, the best way to go, I guess. Yeah.
Cool. Then you wrote your thing, right? And you think it fits because you checked it. Then what? Like you have the how is it? How do they factor this submission? Like how do they rate the submission? Because there's this thing called factor analysis or something, or
yeah. Well, that depends pretty much on the program that you're applying for. There are several programs, like for example the WBSO, in which you only have to make sure that that you follow all the rules and regulations, and if you do so, then you get the green stamp. But there are also programs in which it's more of a competition, and in that case, your submitted project will be rated, and several chapters of your submission will be having bigger or smaller weights on them, and that can be really helpful to get that information beforehand, so you can make sure that the more heavily rated parts are the best of your project, of course.
So is it much like a sort of a checkbox, like a list with checkboxes, and then see like, okay, I need to have an artistic quality there, I need to have innovative gameplay, but also need to portray ethnic minorities in a certain way, for example.
That can be the case, and one step further is then, okay, for the first part, for example, an economic lookout, you can get 30 points, and for the quality of your collaboration, you can get 10 points. So it really depends on the program in what way those points are divided.
And maybe in addition, in general, there is a specific format or application format as well that you need to. You just need to follow that format, of course.
So it's like a template. For
like a template.
right?
So, for example, a specific MIT grants can have, which is another grant we did not discuss yet, but can have, for example, 6 grants which are really about the economics, about the technologies, and everything, of course. So the grant authority can also check per chapter actually what the scores are, or what the how your grant should be rated. Well, and then within this tender system, the highest, like Benny said already, the highest rated grants, highest rated applications receive the grant in the end.
Yeah. And it's really important to exactly follow the setup, because if parts are left out, then there's a chance that you won't be granted.
But that's kind of hard. Like I come up with my own game, and I think my game has an intrinsic value, and I work really hard to get that out. And now I have to talk, in Dutch you'd say, to their mouth, like naar de mond praten. Is that really what you have to do to get the grant?
Well, depending on the program, of course. So, for example, in WBSO, there isn't a real competition. But if there is a competition throughout projects, that competition can be really hard. I mean, there are programs in which, let's say, 100 projects are submitted and only 5 to 10 are granted. So you have to really make sure that you have the best project. And
that's what you call a tender, right?
Yeah, that's a tender.
That's a tender. It's like a competition, and there are a lot of people sitting in, and then you get rated, and the one with the highest rating comes out.
Yeah, and that also means that if you want to apply for a tender, and you feel that on one of the actual checkpoints you don't have a good project, then it's almost certainly not advisable to apply for that grant, because you will never get into the first, let's say, 5 or 10 programs, of course.
So does it help to reach out to the advisory board, or to the people behind the subsidy that actually, the people that you talk to when you call the grant submission for whatever? They're not the people judging, right?
Well, depending on the program, that you will be hearing that a lot today. Depending on the program, well, in most of the cases, the advisors are actually the same people as the ones that are judging the actual applications. So it's always helpful to reach out to get more information, to make sure that your project is already known a bit, and to get, well, in Dutch we call it the gunfactor. I mean, of course, it's just the people handling your application. So being on a good understanding and having good contact can be helpful to get from, let's say, place 11 to place 10, of course.
That sounds really weird. Like I have to go to these people I do not know and say, hey, by the way, I have this cool game and I need money. I like you. Let's grab a cup of coffee. Like, how do you lobby?
Well, I think lobbying isn't really the case, but I think that if you're enthusiastic about your project or your company or your product, then you will be very glad if you could have a lot of people you can talk about your project, of course. And these people are present, of course, to make sure the money goes to the projects which suit the program best. They're not there to make sure that it is. They're not, how do I say, treasure keepers or something like that. They're not there to make sure the money doesn't flow out. They're there to make sure the money gets to the right project, of course.
But how do I get noticed when I want people to see me and know what I'm doing, and know that I'm enthusiastic about my own game, and my work as well? Like, how do I get to these people and say, like, hey, hi, by the way, I'm doing this awesome stuff. Like I don't know these people, right?
Yeah. Well, for example, information meetings are given throughout pretty much all the grant programs, and just visiting those, getting in touch with people over there, asking the questions about the program, and be prepared, of course. I mean, if you attend a meeting, make sure you've already written or read the website, opened the form have a good idea of your project, so you can, just and even what I'd say, to make sure that they can help you to improve your project, of course. I mean, that's good not only for the actual application, but for your project as well, because these are people who see, let's say, 100 applications for games every year. So they are really good experts on projects, the phases of companies, etc., and they can help you with all types of questions.
Well, it feels like going to an investor right now, like pitching your story, pitching your company. Make sure you understand your investor and get to know one another. Otherwise, they don't. Otherwise, you won't get noticed. Is that true?
In a lot of situations, it's well, maybe familiar, but the economic part maybe is a bit downgraded. But you have to write like something similar to a business plan. And what you also see is that if you write a kick-ass application, you can also use it to write a business plan that's suitable for investors, for example. So that's what you see a lot.
Okay, so actually the work you've done working on your business plan really translates well to your grant proposal.
Yeah, in most situations it is, yeah. And maybe what you said, okay, this lobbying and this being noticed, it is of course important and it can help you, but in the end it's not decisive, of course. You just have to write a really good application and still, if you didn't do any lobbying, you can still get the grant in the end. So it can help you, but it's not decisive.
But it makes it a lot easier to have good contact.
Okay.
It makes it a lot easier to actually write your application and know where the specifics are and in which areas you're going into the gray or into the black zone.
So like as a starter and like you're starting your business, you have to write a business plan. How big of a business plan do you have to write? Because I've done some research on the internet and some business plans are like 60 to 80 to 100 pages. Other business plans are 20 pages. Other business plans are 5 pages. Like at what level of business plan do you have to actually like, what size of business plan do you need to actually make like a proper thorough application?
Well, it's please use the formats which are present at the actual programs, and they differ from let's say 2 or 3 pages for the smaller grants, and you can pretty much say that as the more money you're trying to get, the more paperwork needs to be done. And it will go to up to, let's say, 200 or 300 pages. But then you're talking about, but then you're talking about, let's say, 10 million of grants, of course. So subsidies, grants or subsidies, yeah. Grants is the proper English word, but subsidies is most used, I guess. So that really depends on the amount of money that you're asking for in general, let's say, yeah.
I think in addition, in general, or maybe on average, you see, okay, it's about 5 to 15 or 20 pages. So it's some work, but well, you can use it, of course, for other purposes as well. And also, like Benny said, it's most of the times also written in the format how much papers is advised. So if they say, okay, use a max of 5 papers, I would really advise you also to do not write an application of 20 papers because it really can irritate a grant authority.
Yeah. Okay, so and every page has like, so keep this standard of, okay.
Yeah, and differs pretty much per program. There are programs which only have several boxes in which you can put in, let's say, 1,500 letters, and that's just it. You cannot even put in even more information.
So you were talking about investors as a way of funding, but my belief always was that investors aren't looking for your project, but rather look at your company and whether your team has the willpower to execute perfectly, and how about the scalability of your companies, and how will you relate that to companies that are making games, because that's what I'm having trouble with. I'm building on-offs, you know. I hope that my game scales globally, but I mean that's a very small chance. So how do you entice them to still invest in you?
Yeah, telling an investor that it has a really small chance isn't a good idea, I guess.
Obviously, yeah.
Well, that is one of the difficulties, I guess, in the gaming industry, that there doesn't seem to be a pretty good roadmap to success, and the competition is from the beginning is of course globally, and that makes it pretty hard to define. Okay, is this new game you're building or this new project that you're doing, how big can this get and how successfully can this be? And that's something that you will have, pretty much. It will be a little bit more difficult for a gaming company to overcome this. Yeah, that's really the case. And that's the nature, of course, of your industry. On the other hand, if a game gets successfully, it can explode, of course, and that can be interesting for investors, which are playing a different which have a different investing strategy, of course. So that's something that you need to figure out. Which investors have a strategy of spending, let's say, less amounts of money per company, but over a lot of companies. Which is different, of course, than an investor which has only 3 or 4 companies that they're investing in, because they will probably not be investing at an early stage in a gaming company because the risks are pretty high. Yeah.
All right.
So selecting your investor is the key, I guess.
Do you know some? Because I'm already searching the whole internet, but there are not many around
I think that's something
doing
that
some high risk.
we can discuss after
Okay.
the Q&A. But I can get you up to speed, I guess.
Cool.
Okay. We just had a couple of questions about investors. I think that maybe this is also the time to address one of the programs that we're to discuss, which is vroege fase financiering. I'll just mention it very, very briefly, but that's a program which actually helps you with getting funding at the stage that an investor doesn't want to get in yet. But if you have a successfully, let's say, part of a project done, they can be, let's say, obliged to invest in your company. So that's a specific program by the Dutch government, which actually states, okay, if you have an investor ready, but who isn't going to step in at this very moment, you can have some credits to overcome the first stages of your project.
Yeah. So that's really from the idea phase to the production phase. And I believe you cannot yet be started with your production. So yeah, you should really be within the idea phase.
Yeah, but it's really early stage. Yeah.
Hi there. So I'm a developer. I'm really good at that. I'm one of the best, probably. But no,
Great,
no,
great.
that's no. But what I was trying to say is, I'm probably the worst at filling out forms or doing these. If I see even this much text, I'm already confused and I don't read anything.
You're not enjoying it as well, I guess.
No, and I don't think anyone enjoys these stuffs and filling out forms. But that besides the point. Do you have people at your spot? Because probably more people in my industry and here around also hate forms. That can fill out these forms for you and just talk to you, okay, and just fill them in, because I don't have the time or energy to put any effort into, because I want to make cool stuff.
I love this question because that is, of course, the base of our company. That's what we do. We actually make sure that our customers can keep developing, can keep building on the new software or new games. And we have more than 30 people who actually like reading this and filling out those forms and writing those grant proposals.
So they do exist.
So they do exist. Let's talk afterwards and see what we can do for each other. Yeah. Okay, cool. And we're not the only company in the business, so there's a lot of choice.
What I'm doing with my game, what I'm working on is it's pretty big, and I did some calculations. Worst case scenario, I need about 500,000 euros. How reasonable is that? How because I'm a startup, and of course there's like a billion things I can do. I can do a Kickstarter. I can do all kinds of things, and as you progress, there's also more possibilities opening. I'm just at the start of the whole thing, and I'm wondering, like, where can I start, and how big of a jump can I take as a first step in trying to find a grant? Is that 10,000? Is that 50,000? Can I ask for 100,000? Is that based on a business plan and just the idea? That's sort of the questions that are running around in my head. So where can I start, and how big of a step can my first step be?
I think if you look from a grant perspective, grants will in January not fill up that gap to to receive 500,000 euros. Well, it is possible, of course. There are also European grants that goes up to like tens of millions, like Benny already said. But grants generally provide an income of about 10,000 to 100,000 euros, maybe. So if you are looking for more funding than 100,000 euros. You can also apply for these European grants, of course, but your ideas should also be really good, groundbreaking and really innovative. And otherwise, I think, it could be a tough sell, or you should, talk to investors, or you should also, look at other possibilities. Like, of course, I think vroege fase financiering in this case is already a step. You're already a step ahead of that, but there are other ways as well. So maybe investors, maybe like you said already, Kickstarter, crowdfunding. I don't know. There are so much possibilities.
Yeah, I think you really have to search it in the combination of several things, and there aren't grant programs anymore in which you can get 100% of your expenses granted. Mostly percentages vary around 30 to 50%. So the other part has to come from, let's say, an investor or a credit facility of the Dutch government. But you can also, and that's, I think, something that's good to know, that there are a lot of programs in which the actual costs are calculated in a way which differs from the actual cost that you're making. So, for example, in the MID program that we're applying for a couple of companies, actually today and tomorrow, the actual grant is, I believe, let's say 35% of mainly an hourly rate of 60 euros. Okay. And for an average game company, the actual cost for an hourly rate will not be 60 euros, but can be, let's say, 10, 15, 20 euros. So that can mean that a lot of your project can be funded through a grant program like that, and which is actually more than the 35% as it is presented on their website, of course. Okay. So the actual calculation systematics that are used in a certain program can be helpful, but it can also be pretty annoying if your hourly rate is, of course, higher than 60 euros. And that can be present, of course, in current days. If you have a team of really, let's say, artificial intelligence experts, those are pretty highly paid people. So then 60 euros an hour can be a problem. But that's probably not the case for the most companies which are present here today.
My question is, when you have to write a grant for somebody else, you need a lot of information from that person or company, and so it will be a lot of time investment for the one asking you to write something for you. And how does this weigh out? Would you do the bigger part, or is there still lots of work for the people thinking, I have something to do it for me, but I can sit down and lay in a chair?
Yeah.
Well, I think, of course, what we aim to do is to reduce the time our clients need to spend on a grant application as much as possible. And of course, this answer as well is depending on the grant that you apply for. For example, a WBSO grant, we generally do a technical interview with one or more developers, which takes about 1 to 2 hours. And based on that interview, we write the application and we do basically everything else. But you also have other grants, for example, Benny mentioned MIT already, or Stimuleringsfonds, I think. Yeah, of course you need the commitment of your clients to, to be able to write a grant that, that can succeed. Then still we do technical interviews, but maybe you also have documents already or documentations, information already, or that you just have on your shelf, like you can say it. If you can just send it along, and all the missing information we still need, we can do within a technical interview, or maybe 2 interviews. And by working like this, well, our experience is that the amount of effort for our clients is, not that much. But still, of course, you need to spend some time in it. That's just neat.
No, I did an application before at the VSB funds, and I hired someone to assist in that, and he asked a pretty big percentage, 10% I believe, and that had to come in the financing plan. And then the VSB funds called me and he said, "Erik, what are you doing? Why do you hire somebody and throw so much money that's not related to your project?" So how do you tell the funds why are you being hired? You know? You have to explain them.
It depends, of course, on the actual program, and this is also one of the reasons why just having a call with the advisors of the program to get a little bit ahead of things. And a lot of programs make it pretty difficult. For example, most of the tender programs, if you're writing an application yourself, you're competing, of course, against companies like us, which have done an application, let's say, hundreds of times. So that can be pretty difficult for the actual applicators themselves to write the application. And of course, we're a commercial business, so it's always more expensive to hire someone to do that for you. On the other hand, spending a lot of time on writing a proposal which leads to nothing cannot be fitted in your business plan as well. So yeah, that's something that you need to decide on your own or with the advice of a company like ours. Per program, okay, what are the efforts that need to be put in? How are they divided between the actual applicant, so your company, and the advisor, for example, Ugoo? And what are the amounts of money that you can get in, and how important is that to make sure that your company gets the opportunities and the growth that you're looking for? Yeah. But you have to do that before starting with writing the application, of course. So really get a good knowledge of what needs to be done, and not only for writing the application, but also after the actual grant is given. How much reports do you need to fill in, et cetera, et cetera. For example, that can be pretty basic, as in, ending a project with a report of, let's say, 1 page. But if you're applying for, let's say, 10 million from a European fund, you will probably need 2 employees throughout the whole project, only being present to make sure that all the administration is done. But that can be funded from that 10 million, of course.
And also, if you look at the risk you take, what's quite a common practice within the market of grant advisors is that most of them work on a no-cure-no-pay basis. So I don't know if that's your experience as well, but you only need to pay a fee if the grant succeeds. Well, that's quite a common practice, of course, and that's also related to the amount of risk you take, of course.
I'd like to get it back to a couple of specifics when it comes to writing a grant. For example, you talked a little bit of collaboration, right? So what kind of collaborations are typically grants looking for? What kind of collaborations are there?
Well, that depends a little bit on the program, of course. I mentioned that I will be saying that a lot. But most of the times, if you look at the more technology-based programs, then collaboration on the actual development of technology can be granted. And that can also be more specific to, in Dutch it's called sectoroverstijgende kennis. So if you, for example, from the top sector of creative industry would collaborate with a tech company which develops software, let's say for medical purposes, then you have strong foots in two different industries, and that can be pretty helpful in some programs.
Right. So looking outside your domain of expertise and then finding other domains that like fit the project.
Yeah, that's one of the main things. Also, you need to be in some way complementary to each other. So if you are a game developer and you collaborate with another game developer, it's really important to stress the gap that you're bridging. So
make it really specific.
Why do you make each other stronger? And also, if you can collaborate with a university as well, it's also really good for your success rate, because it just makes your application stronger. So if you have good contacts with the university you just graduated from, for example, and you have a professor that is good at artificial intelligence, maybe, I just say something, and he is willing to help you as well with the project, or to give you advice or whatever. It's really a good idea to stress it in the application, and it's also if you can if there can be a university involved, just do it. I would advise.
Pretty make sure 1 + 1 is 3. That's
1 + 1 is 3.
1 + 3. Yeah, that's actually
that's true.
Just for example, the university approach, some grants will not allow such a collaboration, while other grants will. And then you kind of, if you apply for more than one grant, you might be stuck in a situation where if you apply for both of them, you're actually gonna not obey the rules of one or the other grant. Can be the case. Is there any tactical advice on, because you also can be in a point where you're applying for someone and then you still didn't get an answer and you want to apply for another one, but you still didn't get the answer. So you should wait till you get the answer, or you should just try and...
Well, this is a grand strategy, of course. And the stakes grow, these things get more important. Some grants can be combined for the same project. For example, WBSO can be combined with a lot of other programs, because WBSO is from a fiscal perspective not a grant but a fiscal program. But for the actual grant programs, a lot of those can't be combined, or you could get into problems according to the de minimis rules, in which government support is regulated within the European Union. On the other hand, if you are applying for one project within several programs, you can probably reuse a lot of the information about the actual project and about your actual company, of course. So a strategy can be to just apply for 2 or 3 programs, and if you have the luxury in the end that, let's say, 2 of the 3 are granted, just take the biggest one, of course.
So when you're writing a proposal as well, like you get this money, but you don't always get money, right? Sometimes you have to match something. And I heard there's things are in kind or cash. Can you elaborate a little bit about that? Like, what does in kind really means?
Yeah, so there are programs, for example, for making sure you have a good international strategy. Okay, so how do I roll out my product internationally? That is a specific program in which you do not get cash, but you get a knowledge voucher in which you can someone comes in to help you, probably an expert on international business, mostly from the Chamber of Commerce, which can actually help you to write those specific parts in your business plan, or to advise you on the specific strategy to be followed to get introduced in a difficult market. I mean, a lot of people will not know how to sell games properly in, let's say, Colombia or whatever. The Dutch government has experts, or the Chamber of Commerce has experts which have those types of information.
And when it comes to, we already a little bit talked about like doubling, like stapling,
Yeah, stacking.
stacking. That's it. Stacking subsidized. Sometimes it's illegal, and sometimes depending on what grant you are looking for. But there are also two different forms of subsidizing, right? There's one you call a fiscale maatregelen, and a subsidy. So what's the difference between both?
Yeah, so fiscal subsidies are tax benefits or tax agreements are different than grants. And most known grant, I guess, is WBSO, and WBSO actually isn't a grant; it is a tax benefit.
A tax benefit meaning you get benefit on your tax or discount on your taxes.
Yeah, it's pretty much a discount on your wage tax for doing R&D. It has a lot of rules and regulations, but that's basically what it is. And because of the fact that it's a tax benefit, it can be combined a lot. Just like I just mentioned, with a lot of other grants. For example, Innovatiebox is also a tax benefit, but not on your wage tax, but on your profit tax.
So if I make profit, I don't have to pay taxes because I used it for. You have to pay less taxes.
In the Netherlands, you will always have to pay tax, I guess.
So you get a discount on the taxes you normally pay about your revenue or your profit?
So the main programs from a tax perspective are the WBSO and the Innovation Box, and where WBSO can give you a discount on wage tax for the actual hours that you're spending on your R&D. The Innovation Box gives you a discount on profit tax for the profit that you make with your innovative developed product, which you have developed with the use of the WBSO. So
sounds like you need an accountant as well when I go into these kinds of grant proposals.
Yeah, well, for example, if we apply for an Innovation Box program for one of our customers, we usually use a fiscal expert of us to make sure it gets in at the right way, and at the way, of course, that it's maxed out, and that's of course our those are golden eggs, of course, but.
What does it mean, maxed out?
Well, of course, if you are applying for a program, you would like to have the maximum that is the maximum of money that is suitable for your situation. And this is a pretty interesting one, the Innovation Box, because the base for a successful Innovation Box agreement is laid in your actual WBSO application. So getting a WBSO application granted is one, but having it written and granted in such a way that it is very suitable for your Innovation Box application, let's say 2 years later, can be pretty difficult if that's the first time that you're actually applicating. And if it comes out that it isn't really optimal written, after 2 years you can't rewrite it, of course.
All right. So just imagine, like we've talked a lot about getting the money, but now you have it.
Yeah.
What now? Like, how do I make sure that the money I received is well used, and how do I report back to the grant or the foundation that gave it to me?
Well, most grants do have the or give you the obligation that you need to have an administration. For example, WBSO requires from you that you need to submit your hours that you spent on.
So I need to keep track of
R&D.
my hours then.
Yeah, definitely. And
Right.
also you need to show some code, or you need to be able to present something about the how you say, the status and the developments within your project.
So I need to show code, but will be design processes or like an article
technical
or
documents in general. But if you look at IT and if you look at game development, you probably work with a Jira or a Git, in which you can make track of the code that you develop, of course. And that is basically one important aspect of the project administration within the WBSO application. So that's really important, but other grants...
track of your work, basically.
Yeah, that's basically it. And also the progress that you make within your work. Other grants can have other obligations as well. For example, more specifics about the activities that you conduct and why do they relate to the grant that you applied for. And your question about, okay, what if something changes? It's of course depending on the grant, like every question, but in general, you need to be transparent about it. And if you have a substantial change within the project that you received that was granted, you need to communicate that to the grant authority. And well, in general, that's not such a big deal, but you need still, of course, do what you say you did in the application. And
so be honest and clear and show your process.
Yeah, and if your project changes too much, of course, then your subsidy can be deleted. Of course,
Rejected then.
Yeah, you're always getting the money for some specific project, and the more you get off of that project, the more risk you have on losing the grant, of course.
Right. So sometimes I remember that once we had like the Raak Pro money, which is a lot of money. I think it was like 2 million something-ish.
Depending on what's a lot
Ours
of money.
Ours was 2 million, I think. And we had like these accreditation meetings, and I was always a bit confused what they meant. Can you shed a little bit light of what accreditation means when it comes to grants and stuff?
That also differs, of course, per program. But in general, the bigger the amounts of money are, the more questions need to be answered, and the more background checks are done. It can be of all kinds of questions. Also a bit of depending on which program. There are certain programs in which, for example, in the past had some problems with applicants which got the money where they shouldn't have, and in those types of programs where the risk is pretty high for the grant authority, you'll probably get more questions or certain types of questions to exclude the companies which shouldn't be granted for whatever reason.
Right. Okay, so this is my last question for the case it's time's run up.
Yeah.
So at a certain point you get the money, but you never get the money directly, right? It's not that they have this big pile of money. It's like, here's the money. Good luck.
Well,
see you
sometimes you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what should I do if that isn't the case, or what kind of different variations are there?
Yeah.
Well, what you see a lot is that for specific grants, you receive a percentage of the amount that was granted upfront. For example, 60% of 80% or 20%.
So you don't get all.
Yeah, you just receive an amount that you can use for your investments in R&D most of the times. In other type of grants, well, it's really related to the amount of hours that you spend on R&D, and you can just you can just reduce it with your wage stack. So I think it's really difficult again to answer this question really in general, but
But it comes down to it, like you have your financial planning set out, right? So you have your budget there, but you need to be really clear and really understand that some money comes at front, like the 60% you're talking about, and there's also money that comes later, and even money that comes way after your project is finished, right?
Yeah, in the most programs, the money comes in at stages that you need it, because otherwise a lot of companies wouldn't be able to finalize a project, of course. Let's say after you finalize your project, there will be a closing in which the parts that you haven't received at that moment, mostly 10 to 5%, will actually be granted if all reports and administration have been filled in and the project is actually closed.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for all the great answers you'll be giving and the insights you gave in writing a grant or in getting the grant and in having the grant and in getting the money and all.
Yeah.
I think it made a lot of things clear to me. Are there any last remarks or questions? Nope. Nope. All right.
What is your success rate?
Oh, that's a good question. What's your success rate?
Well, that also depends on the program, of course. Yeah, that's really difficult because let's say for WBSO, success rates for companies like us should be above, let's say, 99%, because we of course can pretty good decide upfront if a project is applicable or not. In a tender program, that's really difficult, of course, because we do not have upfront knowledge of all the projects that will be submitted. So that's a difficult question to answer. We have a lot of gaming studios as our customers, which you can actually call or discuss. One of them is down the hall over here, X-Form Games, but we also
it's a bit slow.
This isn't really a lot, I guess.
There you go.
I think Ronimo Games is pretty known here in Utrecht as well. Little Chicken from Amsterdam. These are just some examples of our gaming customers.
Right. Thank you. We're going to wrap this up. Hopefully they can contact you, right, if they have any questions.
Yeah, sure.
We're going on to the next workshop, finding out which grant fits which company. So thank you again, and let's give a round of applause for this gentleman.